Welcome to Priestess Initiations. I'm Casey Dunne, educator, priestess, and professional somatic therapist. In April 2025, I went through a priestess initiation of old and launched the Priestess Initiations podcast 6 months later. Whatever brought you here today, I invite you to drop into the spiral with me. Let's begin. Welcome back to Priestess Initiations, where psychology meets sacred. I'm Casey, and today we're talking about plants. This is exciting for me because I want to talk about what I'm studying right now and why I'm studying them, what I'm learning. And also I want to share with y'all something that happened a few weeks ago when I sat with a marshmallow plant and got something interesting. But first I want to tell you about where this journey of discovering herbal allies started. Because it didn't start in a classroom, it started in my body. And as many of you know, I have fibromyalgia, endometriosis, PMDD, and what used to be called PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. It's been renamed PMOS, polyendocrine-metabolic ovarian syndrome. That name change actually really matters. It reflects what researchers now understand, which is that PMOS is a complex whole-body hormonal and metabolic disorder. It's not just an issue of ovarian cysts. And so the new name, I love it. I love it. It's part of what I'm calling, this new era, because it's telling the truth about the whole system involved. And I also have allergies that have been severe enough that I've been on allergy shots for 5 years, which is about as long as most insurance will cover them. And I was on Zyrtec, which is a daily antihistamine, for over a decade, and Claritin for probably another decade before that. My allergy shots are done now, but thanks to them and the magic of the nettle plant, who we'll talk about today, I am finally off Zyrtec. Woohoo! But getting off Zyrtec was a journey. It took me over 6 months, and that's 6 months to titrate off an over-the-counter allergy pill. That's not a small thing. That is withdrawal. And there were symptoms of withdrawal in my body, and I'm viewing it from a nervous system lens, as my nervous system having reorganized itself around a pharmaceutical and protesting loudly when I tried to leave. And that's a kind of what happens, is the understanding of why you get withdrawal symptoms from antihistamines is that your body stops producing as many of its own. And I'm telling you that, and now we're getting off track, but I'm telling you all this again because it's part of why I enrolled in my community herbalism certificate program this year. And so I'm about a month in. That's like 14 hours of coursework, and I'm super nerding out. So I'm excited to talk to you today. I want this wisdom, not just academically, but because herbs and supplements have been some of the most important tools in my own health journey. And I want to understand them more deeply. I want to be able to offer that to the people I work with beyond what I already know from living in my body, which is a lot. I think that's a type of wisdom. It's a feminine wisdom that we've diminished as a society. And there's also something else that I want to touch on for my spiritual peoples out there. But learning herbalism is a piece of how I'm trying to walk the walk in cyclical living, around earth-based spirituality, around my Celtic ancestry, which is this season 2. And it's the lineage that I'm reclaiming how to work in. And so for me, getting closer to plants, learning their botany, their seasons, their anatomy, sitting with them, and growing them slowly. I've had a little mini herb patio garden for the last couple of years. I'd love to have a bigger garden though one day. But the process of that deepens my connection to the earth in a way that for me feels like it's connecting to an ancestral part of me. My ancestors knew plants. Some of this is remembering. And I think we're entering an age, especially this week and this month, we're having some cool astrology happening with Jupiter and Venus and expansion of the feminine. And we're finally getting to see some of the gold, hopefully. So some of the gold in all the shadow that's been rising. Sorry, I have a little bit of a probably allergies today, actually, because I haven't drank my nettle tea yet. And so I think we're entering this age of remembering the feminine, remembering what it is to be in alchemical balance between the masculine and the feminine, within ourselves, within society as a whole. And so I'm in this course, I'm learning, and a month in, I've already started noticing something in my body, something in the feminine, in myself, that while I understood intellectually as already an issue, is now living as a grief within my heart and my throat. And that's that the more I study herbs, the more I feel the weight of what's been taken from us. There's a direct line, and it's not a metaphor, like a literal line between the plants growing in your yard and the pills in your medicine cabinet. Somewhere between 11 and 25% of all modern pharmaceuticals are exact, unaltered plant constituents, extracted from the plant, purified, and repackaged. If you expand that to include drugs that are chemically modified versions of plant molecules or synthetic copies built from a plant's molecular blueprint, you're looking at roughly 40 to 50% of all prescription medicines. That's nearly half. And yes, I had to go look up all these statistics. Bear with me as I try to name these pharmaceuticals. But I think it's important to understand this because there's grief in this. And so dioxin, which is a critical heart medicine, is extracted from the foxglove plant. Paclitaxel, a chemotherapy drug, originally was isolated from the bark of the Pacific yew tree. Aspirin started as salicin, which is a natural compound in willow bark, before chemists eventually modified it to be a little bit more gentle on the stomach. But the plants were there first. The science came and found them, extracted what it wanted, optimized it, patented it, and sold it back to us at a price point that assumes we've forgotten where it came from. And we have, largely. And I want to hold a little nuance here as we sit with the grief of this, as we sit with the anger of this, as we sit with the theme of humans continuing to extract from the earth, continuing to extract from each other. But I want to hold the nuance because I'm not all anti-medicine. There are real reasons that pharmaceutical manufacturing exists in a way that is helpful. The main one is that when you derive a constituent in a lab, you can regulate the dose in ways that you can't with a whole plant. And for certain conditions, at certain moments, that precision clinically really matters. So I'm not dismissing that, and I'm grateful we have access to pharmaceuticals when we genuinely need them. I certainly would not want to live in a world before antibiotics. But here's what I've learned in my own highly sensitive body, managing chronic conditions long-term, and that's that the lowest dose for me is usually best. That the body does respond to gentle, sustained support differently than it responds to intensive pharmaceutical intervention. So when I'm thinking about something I might take for years, for the rest of my life in some cases, I'd rather take it in lower doses from the plant itself, being digested slowly throughout the day, than in a higher dose in a concentrated pill, even if the pill is the safest way to get that higher dose. But that brings me to, what I want to talk to you about today. And I want to say up front, I'm still very much a student here. I have lived experience with herbs and my own conditions, and I am enrolled in the community herbalism certificate program, but I'm by no means an expert. But even at this early stage, what's becoming obvious is how much medicine is already growing around us, unrecognized. So I want to talk about what I learned about nutritive herbs a little bit. And this is a specific classification. Nutritive herbs are mineral rich enough to be classified as food, not just medicine. They are building, toning, and restorative. They're not particularly stimulating. They're not pushy on your system to do things. They're feeding you. They're generally safe for most people and most ages, and they're generally safe for long-term use. And here's the thing that keeps getting me. Most of them grow locally and abundantly. They are the weeds in your yard that you've been pulling out and throwing away. Dandelion. Dandelion is a nutritive herb. And it's always funny because I know, like, as a kid, myself and a lot of you listening probably can relate to this. But, I thought dandelions were flowers, not weeds. And same with red clover, which I'll mention. But, as a kid, I was like, oh, these are flowers. But then something happens and the idea of the American perfect lawn takes over and these become weeds, not flowers. But dandelion's a nutritive herb. The dandelions you're pulling from your lawn, per ounce, dandelion contains meaningful amounts of calcium, iron, and potassium. And it's a well-documented liver and kidney support tonic. And then red clover, which are those little pinky purple flowering weeds in your grass, also a nutritive herb. Per ounce on those, there's 436 milligrams of calcium, 666 milligrams of potassium, 30 micrograms of selenium, and it's used traditionally as a blood purifier and lymph mover. And it also contains phytoestrogens that are different from the phytoestrogens in like microplastics, and they actually are protective against it. And so they might help balance estrogen levels over time. These weeds, we spray them with pesticide, and there's so many more that I'm not even mentioning. But we pull them, we throw them away. And if you're thinking about foraging any of these plants from your yard or a local green space, just make sure you know the history of the pesticide use on that land first. Because unfortunately, pesticides do live in the soil for a long time, and the plants take them up by the root. So it's not like you can just wash it off. Roadsides, public lawns, golf course areas are often treated. And so if you're going to forage them from land you know is clean, or buy dried herbs from a reputable source. The medicine is only medicine if it isn't, full of chemical residue. But the point stands, which is that what we've been taught to call weeds are in many cases what our ancestors called food or medicine. Or both, really, they're both. And so this category includes plants you already know or might have heard of: nettle, raspberry leaf, and raspberry leaf is just the leaf from raspberry bushes. Marshmallow, oat straw, red clover, dandelion. I'm going to go deep on 3 of them today because they're the ones that I know most personally and the ones that are doing the most work in my body right now. And I've been taking herbs for a long time in different ways. And over the past year, as I worked to get off of Zyrtec and as my allergy shots wound down, I started having an allergy tea that had all 3 of these in it, I believe: nettle, raspberry leaf, and marshmallow. And then last month, I made myself a blend in class, which was cool. And so that's now my overnight tea. It still contains all of those. Nettle in particular is really good for my allergies. But this is the first blend I made for myself. And it contains newer herbs in addition to those older herbs. And I make it in a large mason jar. It lives on my counter and then in the fridge. And I make it most nights to have the following day. And so, the recipe is built from what I'm learning in my program, what I know from years of managing my own conditions, and honestly, just what tastes good to me, enough to drink every day. So here's what's in it. It has nettle leaf, alfalfa, marshmallow leaf, raspberry leaf, rose petals, which are food grade. They're different than the rose petals that you buy at the store. Don't use those. Cardamom, ginger, and dried orange peel. And so I put all of that in the jar, pour boiling water over it, cap it, and let it steep overnight. There's 4 hours minimum, but overnight's better. And the reason for that is that the long steep helps fully draw out a lot of those minerals. And so in the morning, I strain it and I drink it throughout the day. And I've noticed something really interesting this past month. And I didn't get this with my allergy tea, but I do get it with this one I crafted myself, and I'm not sure why. But I crave it. So when I open it and I smell it, I have a craving for it. And it's where I used to have maybe a sugar or a salt craving, now I crave my tea. And when I tell you the mineral content of what's in that jar, you'll understand why I'm so excited about it, and hopefully get curious about, what your own body needs. I think a lot more of us are mineral deficient than we know. And so let's start with nettle leaf, because nettle's doing the heavy lifting for my allergies, and it's also just so cool. It's like big Kali goddess energy to me, Kali Ma. She has her own episode if you're interested. But if you've ever been stung by a nettle plant, you already know that it demands your attention and is prickly on the surface. It's a little scary, like Kali. But nettle also asks us to slow down and be present, to not miss what truly nourishes us underneath the prickly exterior. And so, like Kali Ma, nettle is in a lot of ways a great mother in disguise. And so per ounce, nettle leaf contains 966 milligrams of calcium. But to put that in perspective, most calcium supplements contain somewhere between 500 and 1,000 milligrams per serving. And they're not coming with anything else that nettle brings. Nettle also contains 286 milligrams of magnesium per ounce, 583 milligrams of potassium, and 70 micrograms of selenium. It's exceptionally high in iron and protein for a plant as well, and it has documented anti-inflammatory and anti-allergenic properties. It works on the histamine cascade directly. So this is my first spring without allergy shots, my first spring without Zyrtec in years. And I sneeze sometimes. I'm definitely more allergized than I've been, but I'm managing. And I genuinely could not be managing it without nettle in this overnight tea. And during peak allergy season, I'm experimenting with adding, additional nettle support on top of that. I don't have a yard yet. I'm going to try to grow nettle plant on my patio this summer potentially. I'll have to get a transplant or something because we're past seed season, but I hope to have land one day, and nettle will be one of the first things that I plant, because the relationship with a plant changes when you've grown it, when you've tended it, when you've felt it sting and harvested it anyways. And that is the kind of practitioner I want to be. And so I'm potentially trying to grow on my patio this summer if I can convince myself to invest in a deep enough planter box in the next few weeks and find a starter plant since it's late in the season. But then raspberry leaf is the next plant I want to mention. And it's widely known as a female herb, good for menstrual cramps, which is true. And it slightly undersells it. Raspberry leaf is a connective tissue and smooth muscle tonic. So it strengthens the reproductive system and the small intestine. It's used as a fertility tonic to prepare the body for conception. And it's generally considered safe for most people through pregnancy and postpartum. Though, as always, anything I mention here, bring any new herb to your care provider, especially during pregnancy. But raspberry leaf per ounce contains 3.3 milligrams of iron and 80 micrograms of selenium. That's the highest selenium content of the 3 herbs we're going deep on today, and it's pretty high. So for those of us with endometriosis, PMDD, even just significant PMS cramps, reproductive system dysregulation, raspberry leaf is building something over time. It's a toning practice. It's the slow, consistent support that's genuinely difficult to study with conventional research methods. And I say that not as a dismissal of science, but as an honest critique of how research has historically been designed. And that's that you can't easily run a controlled trial on an herb when the symptom window is 2 or 3 days a month, when cycle phase variation makes standardized dosing complex, and when there's no pharmaceutical patent and therefore no financial incentive to fund the study. Women's bodies have been chronically underrepresented in clinical research, and that only started changing with NIH policies in the 90s. But we're still living in the data gap left behind. And so that doesn't mean that raspberry leaf doesn't work. It means that we're relying heavily on traditional use, observational evidence, case studies that herbalists and acupuncturists and doctors have been collecting, and what women have been telling each other for centuries. Which honestly is trustworthy data to me because it comes from the women and the functional medicine doctors who actually work with the people and the plants themselves. And in my own body, I notice it both ways. There's a cumulative effect from drinking raspberry leaf tea consistently, and it also helps acutely during menstruation itself for cramping. The antispasmodic action on smooth muscle is doing something real in the moment, not just over time. So if you struggle with cramping and you're not already drinking raspberry leaf tea during your period, that's worth trying. And that's part of our cyclical wellness this season. And so I want to flag too that we're going much deeper on PMS and PMDD next week. The episode's recorded. I'm just working on editing it, but we have a guest coming on. Her name's Gabby. She's a friend and fellow therapist, and she specializes in PMDD. And we're going to talk about what's actually happening in the nervous system across the menstrual cycle. So if that's your edge, stay close. There's also a fun fact about raspberry leaf, which I love, and that's that the raspberry plant produces more fruit when its branches are thinned, aka when you've harvested the leaves. And so it reminds us about the power of decluttering, releasing what we've been giving energy to instead of fruiting, which is very apropos for spring. And then the third plant I want to talk about and mention today is called marshmallow. And marshmallow has the root and the leaf, and both are nutritive. And I want to give you the clinical picture first, and then I want to tell you what happened when I sat with this plant. So we'll get into the spiritual of it as well. And so marshmallow is a demulcent herb. And demulcent means it soothes and coats mucous membranes anywhere in the body where there's hot, dry irritation. So good for the digestive tract, respiratory system, urinary tract, reproductive tract. It cools inflammation. It coats ulcerations in the gut. For anyone with IBS, food sensitivities, or digestive inflammation, marshmallow is working directly on that tissue. It contains something called mucilage, which is like a thick kind of mucousy, viscous thing, especially in the root. And when you do a cold infusion of marshmallow root, the liquid becomes slightly viscous. And you can feel it coating your mouth and your throat as you drink it. And that viscosity is the medicine. And it sounds gross, but it actually tastes delicious. And then per ounce, marshmallow contains 110 micrograms of selenium, which is the highest of any herb in this blend. And selenium is a less known mineral, but it's critical for immune function and thyroid regulation. And I used to have inflammatory hypothyroidism for almost 8 years. I don't anymore. And selenium is consistently low in people managing autoimmune and inflammatory conditions. And like I said, in myself, I think marshmallow root is part of what helped me get off thyroid medications. So I don't take any thyroid medications other than herbs. My latest TSH, I've been off all thyroid meds for over a year. My latest came back as like 1.6, which is great. It's functionally good. It's not just good, it's functionally good. And so for those of us with chronic inflammation, if anyone else is listening and they're like, I have fibromyalgia too, anything in that family, selenium content matters. And the leaves of the marshmallow plant, which I primarily use in the tea, because when you harvest roots or stalks, like you are taking more from the plant, right? It's easier for the plant to give leaves back. But the leaves are velvety soft. They're super soft. I don't know if you have one near you, if you look it up and you see one near you, go pet the marshmallow plant. And the stalks are dense and sturdy. You can just tell the plant is holding water by looking at it. It's visibly texturally moist, which is the complete opposite of the Colorado dry climate I live in. And I have no idea how this plant manages to grow here, but it does. And so everything about it communicates nourishment. And then there's the rest of the blend in my tea, which I'll just mention real quick because it's fun. We won't deep dive, but that's the rose petals, cardamom, ginger, and orange peel. And those aren't decorative. They're mostly dry and warm because my Ayurvedic constituency is mostly kapha. Rose petals are nervine and slightly astringent, so they bring something, and they also bring something emotional to this tea because rose has a lot of associations with the heart, with grief, with tenderness. I started adding them to things for myself because they taste yummy. And roses are also a symbol of Mary Magdalene, who I've been connecting with. And she has her own episode if you're interested. Ginger and cardamom are warming and digestive. They balance the cooling, moistening energy of the marshmallow and alfalfa. And something that I learned in herbalism is that formulation's about energetic balance as much as constituent action. So cooling herbs need warming companions, especially for bodies that run cold or have sluggish digestion. My digestion tends to stagnate a little. Ginger helps. And orange peel is high in bioflavonoids, which is the compounds that support vitamin C absorption, vascular integrity, and immune function. They also just make the whole thing taste like something yummy I want to drink cold in summertime. And so every mineral in my tea is drawn out slowly in the dark while I sleep. And there's something ritualistic about that I love. And, there's a new ritual that I'm working on bringing into my life more. And that's also a part of this ancestral earth-based spiritual reclamation, and that's plant sitting. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Mostly just a story. So the story today is this piece. And during my course, I had the opportunity to plant sit with marshmallow for the first time. And plant sitting is exactly what it sounds like. It's a deliberate, receptive practice of sitting with a plant and opening yourself to what it might communicate if you're willing to receive it. And I want to be honest about where I was with this. I don't have a lot of intentional experience with plant communication other than trees. I talk to trees all the time. But my psychic knowing in general usually has historically come through unintentionally since I was a child. The way it shows up when I'm trying to connect is actually quite different from how it shows up when I'm just hit with a knowing. And I can try to connect, in different ways. Like I can use a tool. I can use a pendulum or tarot. But when I'm really working on how do I just tap in, that was a new skill. And I actually learned that skill during my Akashic Records training. And I loved that training. It's cool in its own right. I liked the reading I had gotten years ago, but I wasn't entirely understanding why I was drawn to doing that training, because I don't want to be an Akashic Records reader as a career, right? But now I get it more, because what I learned there is how to drop in on purpose, how to recognize the signal when I'm looking for it, rather than just waiting for it to spontaneously arrive. And so that training really helped me understand something, which is that intentional reception is a different skill than passive reception. And most of us who have any psychic sensitivity have only ever done the passive version. The Akashic work taught me the difference. And when I sat down with the marshmallow plant, I had that framework available. So I could actually use it and drop in. And I connected my energetic roots through visualization, through felt sense, down through my seat, through the ground, reaching toward the plant's root ball. And our teacher guided us a touch through sitting with the plant at first, touching, tasting a little, getting to know each other. But then when we got to the part that it was time to receive from the plant, that's where my Akashic training really helped, in the opening to receiving and noticing somatic and visual communications. And what I got first was a river, not an image of a river, a sensation. I felt it in my low back moving up my spine. And my body wanted to move with it like a snake at first, and then in slow, low circles in my low back, kind of like stirring a cauldron, like water moving in its natural current, going nowhere in particular. And then I saw it, this kind of ball of water flowing in circles, almost like something out of Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you're a fan, I'm a fan. And it was held inside the marshmallow root bundle. So this like water ball, it was an abstract image, very similar to how the Akashic speaks to me, but it was definitely a ball of water, contained and moving, very alive. And I sat with that same sensation for as long as we were given. And it felt in my system like what marshmallow does medicinally, cooling, softening, coating the inside of something that had been a little raw. The plant was demonstrating its own medicine in the language my body could receive. And it was only a few hours later that my brain actually caught up in an aha moment and realized that marshmallow was telling me its use, the cooling hydration, yes, but also the flow in my low back, in that circle, right where my kidneys are. And marshmallow is used for kidney support. So that was just so cool. And the alchemists had a phrase for this, solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate. The experience breaks you open first. That's the solve. And then the meaning crystallizes later in a separate moment. That's the coagula. So alchemists understood that the understanding can't always arrive during the dissolution. It needs the interval. So the plant sit was the solve. The kidney revelation hours later was coagula. And I couldn't have forced that insight during the sitting. It needed time to land. And I like to tell people this about their Akashic records too, right? When you do a reading, give it 6 months to a year to really land because the same process happens. And so I want to invite you to try something, and you don't need a marshmallow plant. You don't need any particular plant, just something alive, a house plant on your windowsill, a bush in your yard, a tree on your street that you walk past every day and have never actually stopped for. And I want to invite you to find it and sit with it. And you can pause this podcast and come back and when you get there if you want. Or you can take this practice with you and do it after listening. But the invitation is to get close enough and touch the plant as if you can, or just close enough to be in its presence. Close your eyes, soften your gaze. Or if a visualization isn't available to you, if your brain doesn't generate images and that's how you're wired, skip the visual entirely. Work with the sensation. Work with felt sense. With a quiet knowing that arrives somewhere in the body rather than behind the eyes. All of it's valid. All of it counts. And so feel your weight drop into whatever you're sitting or standing on. And through that, into the earth. Let yourself be a little heavier. Feeling your feet or your sit bones. And then in whatever way makes sense to your nervous system, imagine or feel or simply intend your energetic roots dropping down through that surface into the earth. And let them reach gently toward the plant's roots. Not grasping, just extending like an open hand, an introduction. And then wait. Notice what happens in your body. Is there a sensation? A temperature shift? A movement that wants to happen? An image, a word, a feeling that doesn't quite belong to you. I invite you to stay for at least 5 minutes. Longer if you can. Let yourself be bored. Let nothing happen and keep waiting anyways. Because the relationship starts before the communication does. The act of showing up, of offering your attention to a living thing, is itself the practice. You're not trying to extract information, you're beginning a relationship. This is earth-based spirituality. This is what my ancestors, your ancestors, really all of our ancestors did before it was taken from them. This is what we're reclaiming, not as woo, not as metaphor, but as genuine embodied practice of relationship with the living world. Some of the herbs I've been studying have been growing on this earth since the Paleozoic era. Those are ancient intelligences. We are the newcomers. And we're only just beginning to remember how to listen. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Trust the spiral. This podcast offers spiritual and psychological education and priestess wisdom. This is not therapy, counseling, or mental health treatment. If you need mental health support, please contact a licensed provider. And in a mental health emergency in the U.S., call 988.